When we confront the darkest chapters of human behavior, we are often left with more questions than answers. We are compelled to ask not only how acts of violence occur, but why they arise at all, and what they reveal about the fragile boundaries between normality and depravity. The cases that unfolded in recent years in 3 different American communities exemplify this unsettling reality, though each is unique in its circumstances. Together, they highlight recurring themes of deception, betrayal, disintegration of trust, and the enduring search for justice. They remind us that violence rarely erupts in isolation. Rather, it emerges within families, within neighborhoods, and within the very structures that are supposed to guarantee safety and stability. In the first case, a quiet university town known for its sense of security was shattered by an act so brutal that it reverberated across the nation. To respected community members who had built their lives on values of compassion and social engagement were attacked in the very sanctuary of their bedroom. They were stabbed dozens of times in an assault marked by savagery and experimentation upon their bodies. At first, investigators could find no trace of the perpetrator, no fingerprints, no DNA, no obvious entry, and no stolen property. The sheer absence of evidence made the crime seem almost surreal, leading authorities to suspect those closest to the victims. Family members endured hours of questioning. Homes were searched, and reputations were questioned. Yet, as time passed, the true culprit emerged from an entirely different direction. A teenager, not yet even old enough to drive legally, confessed to carrying out the murders. What made this case so confounding was not merely the age of the offender, but the chilling manner in which he described the killings. This young individual did not act in a frenzy or under immediate provocation. He admitted to planning, fantasizing, and ultimately finding exhilaration in the act itself. He took calculated steps to avoid detection, taping the soles of his shoes and wearing gloves to prevent the transfer of evidence. Afterward, he kept the weapon as a souvenir. He revealed that he had long harbored violent fantasies, had immersed himself in grotesque online material, and had even begun practicing cruelty on animals. This was not the narrative of a confused adolescent who suddenly lost control, but rather that of someone developing what experts feared could become a lifelong trajectory of violence. The judicial system responded firmly, trying him as an adult and sentencing him to decades in prison. Yet the case did not end there. Shifts in the law forced reconsiderations, raising painful questions for the victims' families about whether justice might be undone. At the same time, the offender himself sought to reframe his narrative, presenting himself as a damaged youth deserving rehabilitation. Experts in psychology debated whether he exhibited traits of psychopathy, with some concluding that he met the criteria almost completely. Others pointed to mental illness, trauma, or medication as contributing factors. The broader community, however, struggled with a more fundamental question. Can such violence ever be understood as anything other than evil? In another part of the country, a respected physician was found bludgeoned to death in her own kitchen. The brutality of the attack shocked neighbors and patients alike. She was known for her energetic personality, her commitment to blending traditional and holistic medicine, and her devotion to her family. At first glance, the crime scene raised more questions than answers. There were signs of forced entry, yet valuables and cash remained untouched. The alarm system had not been activated. Soon, suspicion spread beyond random burglary to something far more personal. The unraveling of this case eventually exposed a web of betrayal so deep it left even seasoned investigators stunned. The victim's spouse, who outwardly appeared to be a devoted partner and father, had in fact conspired to end her life. He enlisted his closest childhood friend, a man who had long shadowed his life and who, in photographs, even bore a striking resemblance to him. That friend, in turn, recruited another associate. Together they traveled across state lines, using a rental car that logged their every movement, stopping at a retail store to purchase supplies, and ultimately lying in wait for the unsuspecting victim. The evidence against them became overwhelming. Surveillance footage captured their purchases. Digital footprints traced their journey. and testimony from confidants filled in the gaps. One of the accomplices confessed in exchange for a reduced sentence, directly implicating the spouse as the mastermind. Prosecutors argued that financial difficulties and the lure of life insurance payouts had motivated the plot, though deeper psychological dynamics seemed at play as well. Here was not an impulsive killing, but a calculated murder-for-hire arrangement that exploited bonds of friendship, family, and trust. The courtroom proceedings that followed forced relatives and community members to confront painful truths. The image of a happy marriage was shattered, replaced by the revelation that envy, financial strain, and manipulation had corroded its foundations. The perpetrators received the sentences that the law prescribed, with the principal instigator facing the ultimate punishment. Yet again, the haunting question remained. How could someone so close orchestrate such an act? What corrosion of empathy allows a person not only to take life, but to conspire against the very partner with whom one has built a family? The third case unfolded in the Midwest, where a couple known for their devotion to their children and their community suddenly vanished. At first, their absence was explained by their younger son, who reported that they had gone away for a holiday trip to a family cabin. He insisted that they were out of contact due to poor cell service. Neighbors and friends were puzzled but did not initially suspect foul play. Days passed, however, and the couple missed work, medical appointments, and obligations they never would have ignored. Concern mounted. Investigators began piecing together the narrative. The older son searched the remote cabin, finding no trace of them. Meanwhile, the younger son carried on in the neighborhood, appearing at first cooperative, even granting brief interviews to local media, though with a curious reluctance to be filmed. As detectives probed deeper, inconsistencies multiplied. They learned that the young man had fabricated large parts of his life. He had pretended to be enrolled in college, forged email chains with imaginary officials, and claimed to hold internships and job offers that did not exist, even boasting of a supposed connection to a prominent aerospace company. For months, he had deceived his parents, his girlfriend, and his friends. When the parents began uncovering his lies, it seems he resorted to the unthinkable. Evidence eventually revealed that his father had been shot in the back, his remains later found dismembered and hidden. His mother's remains were discovered in a wooded river area. Investigators traced the son's movements through digital data and even through a location-sharing feature on his girlfriend's social media account. Tools used to mutilate the bodies were recovered, along with attempts to clean up evidence in the family home. The trial that followed laid bare the layers of deception. Witnesses testified about his fabrications, his manipulations, and his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain a facade. Prosecutors argued that when his parents confronted him with the truth, he killed them to prevent exposure. The jury, faced with overwhelming evidence, convicted him on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with no chance of parole. What unites these otherwise distinct tragedies is the way they force us to reckon with the fragility of trust. In the first instance, the violation came from a youth who should have been far removed from such horrors. In the second, the betrayal originated within the marital bond, where loyalty should have been strongest. In the third, the violence erupted from within a family, with a child turning against those who had nurtured him. Each case illustrates that the line between safety and danger is often thinner than we wish to admit. Another common theme is the role of deception. In the first case, a teenager masked his violent fantasies beneath the outward appearance of a student, even receiving an award years earlier for saving a life. In the second, a husband maintained the appearance of a stable marriage while plotting his partner's death. In the third, a son constructed an elaborate world of falsehoods to shield himself from the consequences of failure. Deception allowed each offender to operate undetected until the violence erupted. We must also reflect on the role of modern technology. In two of the cases, digital footprints became decisive in solving the crimes. GPS records, retail surveillance, and phone downloads provided trails that the perpetrators themselves may not have imagined could be traced. In the third case, a single screenshot of a location-sharing feature guided investigators to the hidden remains. In an era where every action leaves an electronic shadow, technology can serve as both a tool of deception and a key to truth. The psychological dimensions of these cases are equally sobering. Experts debated whether the young offender in the first case was a psychopath or a deeply ill youth whose mental health spiraled unchecked. In the second, the intertwining of jealousy, dependency, and financial desperation pushed a man to conspire against his wife. In the third, delusions of achievement and fear of exposure fueled a decision to commit parricide. Each instance reminds us of the complexity of human motivation, where personal insecurity, resentment, or pathological traits can combine into lethal outcomes. For the families left behind, the suffering does not end with the conclusion of a trial. In each story, relatives spoke of lifelong trauma, of sleepless nights, and of the impossibility of closure. They were forced to relive their pain during hearings, to confront gruesome details in court, and to battle against the possibility that shifting legal frameworks might reopen wounds. Their perseverance underscores the secondary victims of crime, those who must carry the burden of grief and fear long after headlines fade. As a society, these cases challenge us to examine how we prevent, detect, and respond to violence. Mental health systems must grapple with early signs of obsession and cruelty, particularly in youth. Communities must be attuned to the subtle indicators of domestic betrayal. Families must confront the painful possibility that deception can take root even in the closest relationships. And the justice system must balance rehabilitation, accountability, and the protection of society in ways that respect both the rights of offenders and the needs of victims. When we look across these tragedies, we are reminded that evil does not always come in the form of a stranger in the shadows. Sometimes it emerges from within the very circles we trust most. It may be disguised by smiles, by reassurances, by seemingly ordinary routines, and it may manifest not in sudden explosions of rage, but in carefully planned actions that exploit trust and intimacy. Yet we are also reminded of resilience. Communities rallied to support the grieving. Investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth despite false leads and deliberate misdirection. Jurors bore the heavy responsibility of weighing evidence and rendering judgment. Families, though broken, spoke out for justice, for remembrance, and for vigilance. In studying these cases together, we gain not only a deeper understanding of crime, but also an appreciation for the profound responsibilities we all share, to remain alert to deception, to intervene when we see signs of danger, to support mental health initiatives before fantasies become actions, and to ensure that justice is not merely punitive, but also protective, ensuring safety for the future. The brutality of these acts shocks our conscience, but the lessons they impart must also inform our policies, our vigilance, and our compassion. Each victim deserves not only remembrance, but the assurance that their suffering can inspire efforts to prevent repetition. Each survivor deserves acknowledgement of their pain and support in rebuilding their lives. And each community must recognize that the fight against violence requires collective commitment, not passive hope. These stories, while harrowing, stand as testimony to both the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of human pursuit of justice. They remind us that vigilance must never lapse, that trust must be balanced with awareness, and that healing requires both accountability and empathy. And they remind us that even in the face of horror, society can choose to respond with determination, clarity, and a resolve to learn from the past.